From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan, alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianca. What's going on? What's on tap today, Lou?
More winning, more winning, more winning. Matt, today we have the founder and host of the Winners Paradigm, a great podcast that I strongly suggest you guys listen to, as well as CEO of Alpha Influence Media. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Alundas Havens.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's an honor to be able to be here.
What is the winner's paradigm? What does a person need to do to go over to the right column and become a winner?
Absolutely, brother. And first thing what you got to do is you got to realize who you are, what you become from. And that's where a little bit of that grace, a little bit of that, you just appreciating yourself comes in. Because it's one of those things for us, when we look at people, and ideally when I was coming up with the winner's paradigm, I was thinking like, man, what is it that high level achievers do? They're always reinventing themselves. They're figuring out ways to win. And that's really what the winner's paradigm is it's us, I talk about recalibrating mindset and really diving deep into some of the inner beliefs. Because for me, it was having like a rougher childhood, not processing information, to where I started being successful in 1920, running my own part in the Marine Corps while I was at E4 to E6 position, and I was killing it, in the business aspect, but not in life, because all the things that I was running from, the proving people wrong, moved into it. So when you're looking at it becoming a winner and diving into those things, you got to look about the time you put into yourself, the reading books, the conversations you have. It's all the things that mold you into becoming that elite level version of yourself.
So Alundas, you say you got to look at yourself and who you are, right? So who is Alundas? Tell us a little bit how you got started.
Absolutely, brother. So for me, I'm from Fresno, California originally. So middle of California, not really much going on there. Parents had me when they were young. So 1921, we're partying, alcoholics, narcissists, racist stepdad in the mix. So had all these inner beliefs that I would like to challenge, and millionaires are bad, and they would say certain things. And I was just like, man, I just don't believe that. It was one of those where I was always butting heads, getting into it, and then moved on to the Marine Corps. And it was some of these things, people hung out with, were following me, had a traumatic event on boot leave that altered the way I was thinking, and me wanting to be reckless again. But I realized, hey, I moved away from home for a reason. There was things I didn't want to be around, or I wanted to break that stigma of things that were going on. So end up, like I said, becoming my own boss, and I'm killing it, and start drinking a lot, because it was one of those things that work hard, play hard type deal, but I wasn't processing all that information. And that's where got with Zach Babcock, got into his group monthly coaching, and really dove in there, and started a podcast a week before my daughter was born called The Winner's Paradigm. And that's where it was working to recalibrate mindset, talk on these things and be like, hey, this is what it did. So for me, parents used to scream at me all the time. Good thing is I got in the military, and it was easy to push myself because they're yelling at me and I'm laughing. And I'm like, yeah, man, let's go. Let's get some ice cream. And it was the ability to have that humility, to have humor in those situations, like people like me. So they were like, naturally, you're a leader. So Zach really helped me out. And then in April of this year, I was helping veterans their VA claims. And the company I was working for was working 60, 80 hours. And my nanny moves to Minnesota. So I'm holding the baby, making sales calls on the other hand. And the job said, hey, is this really where you want to be? And I'm like, man, I told you this is my corrective action plan. This is how I'm going to make it happen. I'm working 60, 80 hours. Like, nothing else I can do, watching the baby. And that was where it went back to Zach's team. He's like, man, I see great potential in you. We can start a business together. So for me, we started Alpha Influence Media, helping out other entrepreneurs who are trying to really align themselves with the right people like we're doing, getting on the right shows for them, really fitting it to whatever their brand is. So if it's a sales course they're coming out with, get them on sales shows, get them on entrepreneurship to be able to show this. And then pretty shortly here, we're going to chop that up, give them content to be able to share out. And then we also have the ad campaign side as well.
That's awesome. Zach's a great guy. He's helped us out a lot on this show as well.
Alundas, how much did the Marine Corps help you form this new great you?
Ooh, that's perfect, brother. And I love that question. So for me, I was very structured already because of the way that my parents were, they were stern and I knew how to read situations and I was smart there. So really what it was for me was like taking everything that I had and like I said, they're like, you're a leader. So it was really bringing all this out, enhancing it out. So a lot of people, when they talk about it, they're like, oh yeah, this, like, no, I was my own leader, my own boss. I was doing these things. I was briefing in front of people, working my butt off, training, learning all these things, failing as a leader of training individuals. And it was one of those, like, early on, I'm glad I had that opportunity because I was able to learn, all right, there's so many different things I'm doing, to where I was pushing myself. And it was, be my own boss, working 18-hour days, still going to college, working out, and it was one of those where I was like, man, accomplishing all these things, but really what it did for me is like instill that order. But that drive that I had, that I just keep going, doing all these things, it really pushed it out to where it was like the Marines they're more alpha on alpha. Everybody's the best there. So it's one of those where, like, you're continually proving yourself, you're doing the work, you're showing it, and then you're laying that example for everybody else to emulate.
How did you wind up going into the Marines?
Good question as well, brother. So for me, my dad was a Marine. He didn't have a short career, and then kind of had a long lineage of family as well. So it was one of those for me. I could have went to college, could have got accepted a couple in California, but it was one of those for me where I was like, man, I'm going to get money, and then it's going to be that broke kid blowing all his money, partying, being stupid anyway. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to the Marine Corps. I needed to move away from home as well. Got involved, with some friends that were good guys, but I was just like, you know what, this isn't for me. Ended up getting kicked out the house. And then I had a cousin as well that influenced me because he went into a gang, was strung out on drugs, would come to me. And I'm like, bro, I'm just the middleman. Like, I connect everybody. I'm the one that has friends. And I was a people person, so it was one of these, like, man, I don't want to be in this environment. I want to do this. So going in the military allowed me to be able to change my life. But more importantly, surround me with the right people. So I wasn't in that same environment. I was doing those same dumb things. Luckily, went to the Marine Corps, did all the partying like I said I was, and then got into school and really started working on myself and being the best I can be.
So when somebody comes over to you at Alpha Influence Media, right, and they say, hey, Alundas, I want to get on some podcasts, how does this get done?
Yes, sir. So what we do first is we're going to look at, what's your objective, brother, because it could be simple. And I want to know where you're at because, and this is one of the things I've learned is that there's so many tangible things that go into just getting on a podcast. For instance, like, some people are very simple, you know what I mean? They could be straightforward. Hey man, this is what I'm looking to do. I have a sales course. I'm trying to go into entrepreneurship or other sales podcasts. I want to talk about helping people, how to close more deals, how to do whatever. All right, cool. So we can draw that baseline. But with that, what we have to do is say at the same time, no, we're not going to guarantee you go on this particular one because we're playing the long game. And at the same time, you may do this episode now, but it may not drop till next year. So it's letting them know ahead of time all the things that are going on and then setting them up with those right opportunities. So they go on there, they articulate the message, they prove it, they build that business relationship, whether it's good or not for them. But it's really figuring out, hey, what's the best thing for the moment of what you're trying to accomplish. Another one of my clients recently, he has a podcast called The Hacked Life, and he's always talking about these things on how to just become a healthier human being and how to dominate. So I really got him connected with people that he can go on there, talk about these things that he wants to, but it's all strategic. It's funneling back to him. He's able to build that relationship, connect with them on social media. And then now it's a different conversation, of what they're promoting and that, because they're all aligned to the same thing.
So how are you guys actually getting them booked on the shows? Is there a specific process you use?
Good question. So plethora of ways, brother. You can use the apps that are out there because those are amazing as well. I have also a vast network through Facebook, definitely connecting with Zach and now LinkedIn on there. So it really just depends. I can go on certain things, know a lot of people or have friends that have other podcasts. I'm like, man, hey, bro, I got somebody for you that may align with you. And then you can do that. You can go on Podseeker. You can search about 2 million up on there. A little bit harder cold DMing people and emailing them just because we don't check our email every single day, or it's either you do or you don't, so it's one of those things. But it's one of those putting that aspect. You can go on social media. You can send people videos like on Instagram, Facebook, and let them know who you are. Hey, man, love to jam with you. My audience would definitely value you in all the value that you give, where you're going to be talking about X, Y, and Z. And that way you're showing them, hey, I have a platform. You can come on. You can talk about what you need, but it's more of a service of showing the value that they're giving to you, and then you're giving to them as well.
So most people that you're getting booked on these shows, are they going to these shows with something to sell already or something to give away while they're on the show?
So ideally, you would have your message dialed in, whether it was you trying to sell for a business purpose, a course, book, whatever it is, or it could be you just talking about your movement. So one of my guys, he's a breathwork coach. So he doesn't focus on selling the breathwork. He focuses on going on and talking about his spiritual journey of being a firefighter for 20 years and going through adversity, and then now coaching people through these things, talking about PTSD. So he uses that as the funnel for him. So it's just really, you have to have it dialed in. And that's that question, and that's where that partnership has to be good, is we have to be able to have that conversation earlier on. Hey man, I want to have as much knowledge I need because I got to set you up with these opportunities. And two, I don't want to get you on a podcast or you doing something and then we go to chop it up for content. We're all over the place versus being 100% dialed in. Hey, this is the message. This is the move. This is what we're doing.
So they come into you, you help them craft that message, dial it in, button it up, make it concise, short and sweet into blurbs. And then you guys actually go out and you cut up the content from the shows that they're on and help them reproduce that on social?
Correct. Yeah. So we use that through Descript. And then I have Adobe Premiere as well that I'm like chopping that up myself. And now we're outsourcing on that too. So we can be able to give them this content because that's really what it is, so we got to be able to share what we're doing. But two, if you can add that personal aspect, and that's kind of one thing I've definitely learned throughout this process, it's about the value of what we're giving to other people before we even ask for anything in return, so getting a bigger guest, getting on a different podcast, like if they're not doing these things, hey man, I would love to chop this up. I would love to give you some content to be able to share out on Instagram. They see the killer reels. They're like, man, this looks really good. I can put this on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And then now they have a little bit more presence. So it was one of those things, even for myself, started doing basic. And people are like, man, that looks pretty cool. I like what you did. You have a professional intro on your podcast. So it's all the things like certain people don't think about. When you start putting those into play, it changes the game a little bit, but people definitely start realizing that.
How many episodes deep are you into the winner's paradigm right now?
So the winner's paradigm, we're about 60 episodes deep. And then that was with dropping 2 a week, one every Friday. So now slowing it down for the end of the year, because next year I'm going to do 100, and then did so well diving into the mindset realm that I forgot to ask those business questions and really focus on that, because that wasn't my goal. I wanted to talk about the mindset. So how you grew up, what shaped you, how are you successful? How are you dialed in, brother? How are you there for your family? How are you there in business? How do we get better? How do we realize this? And it was cool talking to the entrepreneurs that are like, man, I made this money. I've done this, but now it's this portion of life. And then that's where sort of the second podcast, how to dominate, or it's Alpha Influence Media, about building dominant brands.
Alundas, you seem to be a wonderful global solution for small businesses, especially startups. Somebody that wants to start up a new podcast, a new marketing or ad campaign. Alundas, the CEO, where does he go for help? If you need advice, if you need a shoulder to cry on, in a manly way, of course, where do you refer to for support?
Amazing question, brother. And I actually just recorded an episode for the new podcast over this, was being strategic and deliberate on who you go to for what you need. So I have a breathwork coach, Nick Wingo. I go to him when anything's arising in me, or as I've been doing, this personal development and sharing it as well. Like, it's allowed me to pop in other things or to be able to work through it. So in my case, it was having the coach there, having my business partner, Zach, in Tim, where I can run into there. Tim's a master when it comes to operations. So I can ask them that, or the technical things, ad campaigns, the videos for the podcast. And then Zach as the other visionary. Hey man, this is what we can do. This is how we can land you this person going through there. Having, a good friend, Tony Watley, now that I interviewed him, and he'll say things, or I'll have an idea and I'm like, hey brother, can I run this by you? And it's being able to have those people that you go to for those answers that give it to you. And that's just scratching the surface with a couple of people. I've really been diving in as well, figuring out, hey, if somebody's doing something well, how do I be able to learn this from them? What could I do to get better?
So you've been podcasting for a while now. You're getting people set up on other shows. What do you think the biggest benefit to podcasting is for you personally and for people appearing?
I would, and I would definitely say it's aligning your personal brand to your business. There's some businesses out there that are straight cuts forward. Hey man, this is what we do, and this is why we do it. This is why we're good. But the people I've seen that are using their personal brand is pretty damn awesome. They talk about their story, talk about what they overcame, talk about, hey, business, or maybe even getting to the point where they make the money in their business. And then now it's overcoming a new hurdle that they didn't think they originally had, or a new complex that they created on the journey of proving people wrong in executing. So it was one of those things for me, to where it was like, as I dive in and work on these things, I'm able to actually share it with people. And having that podcast, you can definitely be able to prove your messages. And a lot of people just want to be heard. It's one of those things where either it's in business or if it's in personal matters, we think that as men, women, that people don't care about us. They don't know what's going on. And then when you share it, they're like, man, that's true. I know exactly how it is working 18, 20 hours a week. And then your wife being mad at you because you're not spending time with her. Baby came along, and that's what clicked it for me. It was like, man, I really need to be here, because if not, we're both going to be going at it all the time. And I'm definitely not going to make these sales calls.
So Alundas, is the podcast of today the business card of yesteryear? Is that how you start the conversation in business now?
I believe so, brother, because definitely you're giving people insight of you. And for instance, I got connected yesterday with a gentleman, and he just started listening to the podcast. Man, I really like this. You're talking about this, and now you're going on these things. And it was one of those things for me, like it just spoke for itself on the conversation we have and that. And it's one of those where, yes, everything that you do is intentional, and you're giving out all this knowledge, but at the same time, when you get to be able to chop that up with people, let them know exactly, hey man, this is what it is, help them, give them that free information. Like, you're just proving exactly who you are, why you're the leader, why people should go to you, and then they can be able to have that as the means to help them for their situation as well.
Alundas, I would love to talk to the Alundas of 16 and a half, 17 years old. And if that young man had a choice of going to the military, university, or a trade school, knowing what you know now, what would you tell junior you to do a couple of years back?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I believe I still would go to the military. At the time, it was very difficult for me. So had a messy situation with moving back and forth to parents' houses. Really, dad was abusive, all this craziness. So at that time, I was in a very bad place. I wrote a letter to the court saying, because I moved back my sophomore year to my mom's, and that was writing a deal that I would go to my dad's 3 weekends a month, and then I would live with my mom going to school. So it was cool to go to school where I wanted to, but it was terrible because away from my friends every week, dad's abusive, me and him fist fought all the time. So in that really dark place, upset, started challenging everything. He goes to the school saying I'm going to hurt myself because I said that's how I was living. That's how I felt when I was living with him. So it was one of those where it was very dark for me trying to get through it. My mom, we always had food in the house, but we didn't have extra money sometimes. So it was being that middleman, having the friends, hey man, I'll go to the store for you for some chips. And then being able to get a dollar or two to get what I needed, So it was being very smart, being cool about the people I was around with, and learning about the military. I was like, man, I get to be able to take myself, go somewhere where I can be able to be good at what I'm going to do, and then dive all in on me. So for me, I needed to get out away from my environment, because the more I was around it, the more I was around the mediocrity. Or for instance, like even now, it's very difficult for me to go back home because everybody's doing the same thing. They're talking about the same BS. They're like, oh man, you want to drink? You want to do this? And I'm like, bro, when are we going to talk about business? Like, when are we going to talk about me in like the last thing you've read or the last thing you came across, a conversation that's made you better? In my case, it was, trying to put the work in, and then having the extraneous people being like, man, you're trying to read a book. You're a nerd. You're doing this. And you're like, bro, I'm just trying to do better because of the situation, and I don't want to keep living this way.
So you made a great choice, right? You joined this wonderful tribe that made you grow. It allowed you to flourish. And then out of the blue, you blow your knee out. Talk about that trauma. How did you have to recover that to continue that growth? Because I'm assuming there had to be a huge physical aspect in being a Marine. And now you take that away from you, what happens?
100%, brother. And up until that point, I powered through every single injury, dislocated both shoulders 3 or 4 times. So it was one of those where nothing was stopping me, lifted weights like crazy, and then hit that point. So like I said, I was in a E4, E6 position. I was my own boss. That's something that people are normally having years on them in there, 8, 10 years at that position. So my case, I'm like, oh, I did this in almost 2 years, and I'm my own boss for 10 months. So it was having that ego that was keeping me alive and brave, being able to be in rooms and be able to get people to get their stuff done regardless of what the mission was. I'd be like, hey, you either do this, you don't get promoted, you don't stay in, you look like a terrible Marine, so get the stuff done like you're supposed to, and we can move on. So it was getting tactical on those things, but it was very difficult because the moment I got hurt, I got ripped off a promotion board. So I should have won a promotion board and went to be an E5, but got injured. Hey, now you're worthless. You're not a good Marine anymore. So it was one of those where it was definitely difficult at one point, putting the uniform on, trying to go to work, trying to be cool with things. And then after, got a boss that micromanaged me. And that was the big killer, because it was one of those where you can't speak freely. You can't be that leader and be like, hey, this is what we can do. So my ideology was hey, let me run the shop, let me do what I got to do. You can be able to go into meetings, have a good time, do what you need to do, but you're not going to be on any basic level stuff. You're on the next level of what you're doing. She didn't want that. She wanted to micromanage, nitpick at every single thing, make us waste time, make us redo things just to prove a point sometimes. And it was one of those for me where I had to keep battling through it. And even when I got out the military, all the skills that I had, it was definitely difficult because I only served 4 years to transcribe that on paper because I didn't have the degree yet. Businesses would be like, oh, well, you're young. We definitely can put you at an entry-level sales position and you can do this. Or you can't just go directly to be a manager here. You're going to have to start out here. So it was one of those where definitely it was difficult and got into roles where I was just like, man, I don't know if this is a fit for me.
But it works out. Look, you're a father of a family, CEO of a small business. You've got your own podcast. What's next? What else does the world have in store for Alundas?
And thank you, brother. So next is we have both podcasts. So it's really just growing that, helping people get their message out, whether it's in business or whatever they're trying to promote. And then 2, we're going to have some live events so I live about an hour and a half from LA on a good day. So 2 hours, with traffic, and then an hour from San Diego. So eventually we're going to have events in both of those because even at Zach Babcock's event in St. Louis, I went in July and we're there and our guys are like, hey man, so when are we going to have in San Diego? When are we going to have this? So that's going to be the goal next year, is to be able to start helping people with the recalibrating mindset, kind of build that. And then I also in the future want to build like another community that way. So kind of make it different from a mastermind, have like another brick and mortar, have a gym, and then run it as a gym, but then have, other entrepreneurs flying in, being able to talk about their business or, hey man, what do you do? Oh, I meditate a lot. I do yoga. Oh, you do yoga? You don't even work out sometimes, to teach people, like, if you don't have the time to do a 10-minute workout, do whatever it is and show up for yourself, you can do all these other different things.
So Alundas, we want to be respectful of your time. So can you tell everybody where they could find you on the socials?
I appreciate you, brother. You're going to go to Alundas_Havens, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and then the podcast will be the Winners Paradigm Podcast and Alpha Influence Media.
Nice. And what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Should they shoot you a DM? Should they send you an email?
Yeah, I would say DM, Facebook, Instagram, easiest way. People, for some reason, when they email me, they don't do my business email, they do my personal, and I don't even check that one. So I'm like, man, why'd you do that? Just hit me up on Facebook. I'm always on there. Messaging to people anyway.
Awesome. So Alundas, before we let you run, my man, describe yourself in one word for the audience.
So I'd say resourceful. No matter what I was going through in life, I always figured out resources, who to talk to. Been very fortunate, and some of the people that I've met and that have helped me out through it, whether it was, before going to the military, it was getting in the military, even getting out, you get around those right people. You learn about, oh, shoot, how can I do this? And then you just adapt from there.
Alundas, thank you so much, my man. And that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.